Hey, Andrew, welcome back to the show. Give us a little update on yourself.
Hey, Brian, glad to be back. Things are still pretty busy for us. We're doing the quarantine home office situation, but I saw your post about your sales rules and you had a lot of good comments. So I thought we might be able to talk a little bit more about some of your rules, some of the rules that are working for me, and provide some value to the audience.
Yeah. Where would you like to start? Did you have one in particular you'd like to top off with?
Well, sure. Why don't we hit like the first one you put, which I resonated with, was revenue solves all problems is one of your rules.
Yep.
And I saw some people in the comments, they're, oh, money won't solve everything. And there's maybe some mystification around what you meant by that. But maybe just asking you, what do you mean when you say revenue will solve all your problems?
Okay. Well, when you're in a company and you got a sales team, right, there's always friction unless the company's making its number. Okay. If the manager's making their number, they're pretty happy. If the reps are making their number, they're happy. Okay. The minute any of that goes astray is when the finger pointing starts, because it's never anyone's fault. It's someone else's fault. It's marketing, it's engineering, the product doesn't work, the economy's not good, this is going on or that's going on. And, because I talk to sales leaders all the time and I go, all you have to do is get revenue in. Focus on closing deals, getting accounts, getting meetings, getting all the steps it takes to have revenue come in, right? What's the number one cause of divorce?
Money.
Money, right?
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I was about to challenge you, Brian. I'm just going to say, hey, well, it doesn't solve all your problems. It probably won't help you if you're having a fight with your wife, but maybe it will.
Well, of course, it doesn't solve every problem in life, right? You can't buy another year of life, right? You can't go down to life school or life store and say, here's $1 million, give me one more year. Of course. But within the context of sales, I didn't want to put a post out there with 15 pages of disclaimers, right?
Which is what, if you ask legal,
that's what they
would
have
had to do.
Right.
So I agree with the rule there as it pertains to sales. And what we say in our real estate world, we're talking to salespeople. Hey, if you just worry about selling another house, it will solve most of your problems, because you get one more big fat commission check, a lot of this goes away.
The doubt goes away. The wonder if I'm doing the right thing, the worrying, a lot of the negativity, it goes away.
The pressure.
Right. Because we sell and we're most successful when we're in the flow state. We're in that zone, right? And to be in that zone, you have to have the confidence. What gives you more confidence than having just closed a big deal? You're on top of the world, right? You're Superman after closing a big deal. How do you feel after losing a deal? You're like, oh man, is it ever going to get better? Because this goes to another rule of mine where people don't think, they react. And you see it right now. And not only do they react, they typically overreact. They give too much meaning to little negative things instead of taking the emotion away and saying, well, maybe I didn't qualify that well enough, or maybe they weren't interested enough. Maybe I should have been in touch with them a little bit more, listened to them a little bit more. And when they told me they wanted a man cave, I should have believed them and showed the man cave more than I did the kitchen. Little things.
That's a really important one. I wrote that down. That wasn't on your LinkedIn post, by the way. But
this is a constant going process, Andrew. This is not static.
Exactly. Hey, you want to be a maverick or not? You want to be a maverick or not?
Well, that's the first edition.
Yeah. So shout out. If you haven't got Brian's book, I'm not sure when it was published, but it's really good. It's a sales book. It's not like super granular, real heady psychology.
It's how to say it.
It's brass tacks. This is how you do sales. But I like the way you phrase that. People don't think, they react.
Yes.
And that's a dangerous place to be as a salesperson. If all you're doing is reacting and not preempting anything, you're not going to close much business.
Right. And not only that, it's customers react. and don't think. They're not putting together a pluses and minus cost benefit analysis of every decision. They have a feeling. They look at that house. Uh, why do you bake cookies before an open house? So it smells like a home, right? That's an emotion. That is not logic.
That's going to bring me to one of my rules.
Don't
But
bake
before I hit
cookies.
to it, before I hit it, it's you kind of touched on it, and I'm sure it was in the comments of that great post you had, which is, people buy emotionally and justify logically. That's like the age-old sales tool. So that's kind of what we're getting at. But as far as baking cookies, one of my rules is, if your competition's doing it, stop doing it.
Stop doing this.
Because you want to be different. And it's easy to say, and everyone says, hey, we do things differently, or this is why we're unique. But the real way to judge that is, hey, if the bulk of your competition is doing something, you should not be doing that. You need to find a better way, a different way. And we take that to heart on our end. Like, we don't bake cookies at open houses. I won't stop someone from doing it, but I don't think it's probably the highest and best use of someone's time. The same thing with in our B2C world, a lot of agents will like deliver pies to all their clients on Thanksgiving. Nothing wrong with it. It's a nice touch. But my competition does that. I'm not the pie guy.
Yes.
I'm
right.
the let me stuff money in your pockets, get you the best deal guy. But hey, I probably won't bring you a pie. Just to
But
know that.
both are reactions or emotions, and because an emotion is a reaction, it's not a logical process. It's a uh, slap on the knee, your leg moves. You didn't think about it, your leg moves. That's our wiring. And what we do as salespeople, we think business, we talk logically. When you talk about money, that makes the people who earn that money feel good.
Right.
Yeah. The cookies make them reminded of home, and you're right, because the impact of that diminishes because everyone does it. It no longer stands out. It was probably genius 15 years ago.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad idea, because it's kind of hitting an emotional chord there, but just along the veins of, if your competition is doing something, if you're selling whatever it is to some business and all your competitors try to get past the gatekeeper this way,
Yes.
that's not, you need to develop a new way to get past the gatekeeper. Be a maverick, do something different.
Do something different. It's
Do
like
something
when
different.
everyone asks me, what's your best elevator pitch? Or how do you handle this objection? Or what's the best subject line? And I'm like, okay, if I came up with the best subject line, everyone starts to use it. By law of nature, it's going to become not a good subject line anymore.
Yeah, it's economic Darwinism. It's
Right.
only lasts so long until it evolves.
Yeah. How many subject lines do you get a day that say, quick question? It's like, oh God, I know it's
Just
spam.
delete.
Quick question. And then there's 13 paragraphs. First of all, it's not a
Yeah,
question.
exactly. I have another question for you on one of yours that I liked, which you said, divide and conquer. Now, that can mean any number of things, but from a sales perspective, a sales management perspective, what did you mean by that?
Yeah. It's actually divide and concur.
And
Okay.
concur.
Concur. Okay.
Okay.
Which does get you conquer. Okay. Let's say you're selling a house to a family. Okay. What you want to do is talk to each of those people independently if you can. Because when people are together, there's a unified accountability, a level of protection that's put there. Because I'm sure you've seen it, like when all of a sudden either the husband, the wife, or whoever, even the kids, are off to the side and you're talking to them and they're like, no, there's nowhere near the ballpark. That's going to be an issue. Or the other place was closer to the grocery store. Or this is a little out of our range. Now, would they say that when they're together?
No.
No. See, I learned this early on because in B2B, they push you into a meeting. They have too many people there. And you ask a question like, what's important to you? They'll be like, we're not really sure. Why don't you show us the product? They'll flip it back to you. If it's one-on-one, the person will be wide open. Okay, I needed to do this, this, and this, and tell me how it's different than the other guys.
That makes perfect sense. Divide and concur.
Right.
See, I didn't even get that. The play on words. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense. And in our last podcast episode, like I referred to that as like the cast of characters. You really got to know who's involved in the decision-making
Yes.
process. But the only way to really know what's important to them is to divide
Yes.
and get some concurrence. So maybe you can conquer the situation at the end.
Right. Because how are they going to make this decision on which house are they going to buy? Is it going to be based off of school district, square footage, build out, return on investment, affordability? One of those things is really going to come to the top of the reason they're going to buy it, that house versus another house. And if you don't know what that is, and you're talking about the size of the man cave or the backyard or the proximity to the baseball park, they might be, oh yeah, that's good. Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, that's it. And then you don't have the right point to magnify.
No, it makes perfect sense. And it's so unbelievably true. And what I've discovered is a lot of times people don't even really know
They don't.
their true compelling reasons to do business, which is why you really got to listen and ask these good questions,
Right.
divide and concur.
They react. They say, the cheapest or the biggest or the one closest to the restaurant we like. But are you going to make the decision off of that? And they're always going to tell you they're going to afford more than they really can, or how serious are they?
Yeah. So that's a good one. Divide and concur. That could be its own like 5-part series on how to do it and the
It is.
complexities
Yeah.
of that. But okay, so I was wondering what you meant by that. Obviously, I wrote down the wrong words because it is a little play on words there, but it
Right.
makes perfect sense, and you can't miss that one. One of my other favorites is, for me at least, I always say, begin with the end in mind.
That's a great one.
Which, and it's probably someone said in your comments, I'm sure, because you got a lot of really good salespeople on there. But the key for me is it comes back to the primacy recency effect, which is, hey, people kind of remember how things start and how things finish.
Yep.
And you have to begin each meeting, each interaction with a logical, respectful outcome that you're hoping to achieve by the end of the meeting.
Yeah.
And if you do that, the other side's going to be really receptive. And hopefully when you pick things back up, it starts well again. So keeping the end in mind also kind of ties into another one of my rules, which is sales is not about getting your emotional needs met.
No.
And that's a big one for people. Because, oh, this person said this, or you get in these little fights when you're trying to negotiate this deal, and people want to feel good about themselves and stick it to the other guy. Even if you're 100% right, you do not do that because you got to keep the end in mind. And the end is going to the bank, not making this guy or girl feel like shit and making you feel good about yourself.
Yeah. When I was a manager, I always used to ask my reps, you want to be right or you want to be rich?
That's even a better way to say it.
Right.
That's the better chapter headline.
You might convince yourself that you're right, but you're probably not going to convince them that they're wrong.
And you shouldn't try to.
No, that's not the objective. The objective is to close the deal. Yeah. And even, especially like in your business, the end is, yes, a great deal, but a referral for them to say, work with Andrew, he's great. When anyone asks them, who's a great person in real estate? Oh, Andrew, definitely the go-to person. That's the real outcome you want because they become your marketing team.
Exactly. And that person's worth way more than one commission. Like even you, Brian, like say so you bought a house from somebody, even if it's $1 million house, big fat commission. How about if you had someone with the reach and the social media prowess to say nice things about you on the internet? Well, that's probably worth 10 times more than your commission check.
Yes.
So I like the little spin you put on that. The end in mind is not just closing the sale. It's, are they going to say nice things about me on the internet? Can I coach them on how to refer me in a true win-win fashion?
Yeah.
Getting clear on what the end is for you and your clients are really important. So I didn't think of that until just now. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, because it gets you away from the emotional knee-jerk reaction and gets you focused on the big picture. Because it's Stephen Covey's number 2 principle. and he does a story of, imagine a funeral and it's yours. Who do you want to be there? What do you want them to say? How do you want them to feel? I mean, that's our end. I mean, that's the very end.
Yeah,
That's
that's
too
another great
morbid,
book.
but
Yeah, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. For those who haven't read it, it's a really I guess it's properly rated because it's rated very highly, but it really does give you a little mind ninja move on your head. It makes you think quite a bit. I mean, it's not the Maverick. Let's be honest, it's not.
it's
Maverick.
not that good. But yeah,
It's worth a read. It's worth a read. All right, let me ask you this, Brian, because I love this one. This is my favorite one, and I read your list on that post. I said, I just got on. I said, I'm going to comment on this one, which was what's not overtly positive is covertly negative. So I think I know what it means. Let's ask the master himself. What do you mean by if it's not overtly positive, it's covertly negative?
yes, because when you're in a deal, a conversation, an interaction with a client, we are seeing and hearing the things we want to see and hear naturally. We have to test it. We have to have little acid tests. And if they're not calling us back, if they're not responding to us, if they're not either showing interest or dislike, because somebody dinged me on it. It's like, well, how about if they're asking questions about a certain feature that they don't want or don't like? Well, I consider that positive. They're working with you. They're talking it through. They're expressing what they like and dislike. That is positive. What's negative is they're not calling you back. They're not texting you back. They're late. They didn't show up. They're telling you what you want to hear versus what they really care about, what they mean. So since it's not overt action, I probably should rephrase it. What isn't overt action is covert bad stuff. Because
I like the way it's worded. It makes perfectly sense the way you're explaining it.
right, because when people get ghosted, is that positive or negative? People, oh, they could be on vacation, they could be sick, they could be busy.
But if it's not overtly positive, you're pretty safe to assume it's covertly negative.
Yes.
And it makes perfect sense across the board. It doesn't matter where you are in the sales process. If it's not overtly positive, as in if you don't feel like you're getting the communication, the next steps kind of outlined, if it's not overtly, hey, everything's okay, more than likely there's smoke. And where there's smoke, there's a fire, and this thing's on its way down.
Right, because nobody likes to give bad news. Nobody likes to hurt anyone else's feelings. You know, people like to say, oh, I'm going to think about it, or why don't you call me in 2 weeks? And I always say, well, let's get something on the calendar. It could be 5 minutes, just so that we both know where we stand. And trust me, if you're not interested, just tell me. And just tell me why and see where we misunderstood each other's requirements.
As long as you do that up front, like a really good salesperson, you should save yourself the anguish. Like one of my rules is always inspect what you expect.
Right. You know, I believe that, but I think that can be, I think you should do something at the beginning and something at the end, because at the beginning, they're most excited. Right. But then at the end, they may or may not tell you the truth. And that's why
so I think
having little acid tests, if they won't commit to a 5-minute call 2 weeks from now, how interested can they be?
It's not overtly positive, is it?
It's not overtly positive, is it?
Well, it's like, that's why in the beginning, in my opinion, you just have to make it kind of like you said it real quick there, but there's an art to it of how to make them feel it's totally okay. Hey, at the end, I'm going to bring it up. What is the next step? Is it cool if we talk at the end? And just get agreement on it, because everyone's going to agree to it up front. And then at the end, if you have the guts to go back to it and say, hey, remember at the beginning we mentioned X, Y, and Z, boom, and close for that next step. And if the answer is not overtly positive,
you got to assume it's right. And then, but that acid test gets you the opportunity to dig in. And I say, well, you seem so excited. What turned you off? Do you know? Or you just got a bad feeling about it? You know, it's okay to share it, and it's okay to, even if you don't know. But you now know that they are not going to do anything.
because it's not overtly positive.
Right. So you need to either dig in or write it off, because, or come up with some other alternative.
And the tactics to doing that is so important. And a lot of times I use like historical precedent, because if you're putting someone on the spot, like, hey, why didn't you like it? What's going on? It's easier to maybe get a third party story going on, or saying, hey, not saying it's the case here, but a lot of times in this situation, it could be A, B. So you give them a little menu.
Yeah.
Make it easy for them to
come to the conclusion, right? Because they may not know.
Yeah.
They're reacting.
Yeah. And people don't think, they react.
They react.
Well, maybe, so I'm just spitballing here. Maybe it's important at the end of a presentation, at the end of a pitch, sales call, whatever you call it in your world, do you give them a little time to think it through before you go and ask them for that next step? I don't know. Do you, Brian?
You can say, from what you see, what's your reaction? You go for that emotional thing. Don't ask for the logical thing. Yeah.
Go for the reaction. That could be a good rule right there. Go for the reaction, because you're not going to hold them to it. What's your reaction? I'm not asking you to give me your dissertation on this.
Right. What does every therapist say? How's that make you feel? They don't ask you, what are you thinking? Because the thinking has nothing to do with it. It's how do you make you feel? If they're excited and want to move forward, you don't ask them, give me an exact reason why. Right? It's like, oh, they love the man cave, they love the kitchen, they love the master bedroom, they love the location, they love the build out, they love the neighbors, the acreage, whatever it is.
Right. When you ask them, how does that make you feel? You're going to be, I just can't wait to have my friends over down here. We're going to be drinking beer there. But if you ask, hey, what are you thinking? You're thinking, this might be $4,200 a month. That's what I'm thinking.
How am I going to afford that?
Speaking of the feeling thing, and I commented on your post with this one, which is one of the rules we kind of live by here on our sales team, is how I feel sometimes determines how I act, but how I act always determines how I feel. It's kind of a cute way of just saying you got to take action. Sometimes you have to do what you don't feel like doing, and we know that. But it's like going to the gym. Do you feel like going to the gym?
Oh yeah,
really.
Every morning.
Right. But just because you feel it, sometimes maybe it stops me, sometimes it doesn't. But what you do, the action you take, always will determine how you feel. How do you feel after you go to the gym? After you make your prospecting phone calls? After you have a good meeting? How you act determines how you feel. And that's just more of a mindset piece for salespeople to just wrap their head around, if you want to feel good.
Right. And yeah, because I'm a runner, and the first 20 minutes of every run, what's going through every runner's head is why I should stop right now. My ankle's a little sore. It's raining. It's a little bit colder than I'm used to. I really do have a lot of work to do. And that's why I always run as far away from my house as possible, because then I have to come back and I don't want to walk.
That's so funny. I find it the same way. Every salesperson, for the first 20 minutes, they're making their follow-up calls or doing the thing they know they should do. They're coming up with reasons why they don't have to do it. Yes. I already got my number. I'm probably going to hit my quota anyway.
They're not going to pick up. Maybe I'll send an email. Maybe I'll connect with them on LinkedIn.
Well, let me ask a bonus question, unrelated. You're a runner. You're in your neighborhood a lot, filming some content. Are these little video vignettes you're doing, are those pre-run or post-run, or is this a separate pre-dinner walk activity?
They're definitely pre-run.
Pre-run.
Yeah, you don't want to see me post-run. What happened to you? I'm sweating, limping, out of breath, red-faced.
It's for people out there thinking about creating content, which is why I'm drawn to a lot of the stuff you do. I'm like, this guy's constantly putting stuff out. It's a good little routine to have. Hey, before I go on my run, you're outside, you're in nature. If you feel it, you pull it out and you hit it. If not, whatever.
Right. Yeah. And that's it, because when you're moving physically, your brain starts to work. The blood's moving. And, I always think about sales is kind of my thing. And I always try to find a counterintuitive point to get people thinking. And what disappointed me about that post, though, and get your opinion, there was a lot of platitudes in there. It's all about relationships. It's all about attitude. It's all about whatever. And it's like, no, That's a platitude. That's not a rule.
Right. It's all the cliches. And
Yeah.
that's why I reached out and said, we need to talk more about this, because every single sales post ever, you're going to get the basic platitudes. But when you unpack these rules a little bit, like I'm learning right now, like that divide and concur, like that's a big step. Like you might want to like really listen to that, 'cause that's an art in how you do it, and it's going to be different every time. But just knowing, just being consciously aware of that's a step that you're probably going to have to take. You're a lot better than being unconsciously incompetent. To
Right.
hit that,
Yeah, because if you take the platitude or cliche and say, oh, it's all about relationships. Well, not really. I mean, I'm sure you have siblings and family members. Are they going to buy a house from you right now?
no.
No.
And when I do, I give them the commission back anyway. It's like they're great to work with. I don't get paid.
Yeah. And, and a manager once hammered my boss on this. He goes, if your brother worked at that account and he doesn't have the juice to get the order done, you're not going to get the order. So the relationship is part of it. And I think too many people try to so oversimplify sales. It's a numbers game. It's all about insight. It's all about process or strategy. No, it's a performance, right? Your point about how you act, because I'm sure you've had great sales calls, mediocre sales calls, and lame sales calls, right? But you're the same guy. It might have been because of them. It might have been because how you felt, the weather, the house you had, all these things. It's a performance.
It's true. I forget where I heard it, but it resonated at the time where someone said, "Hey, sales is like a Broadway play put on by a psychiatrist." Because and it's true, because you don't know what you're walking into sometimes. Like if I'm trying to sell Brian something, I don't know if he's having a good day or a bad day, or what his portfolio just did. Or you really have to be adaptable and inquisitive on that. And a lot of that, if you've made it this far in sales and you're watching this type of content, you're probably naturally pretty good at it with the EQ versus the IQ portion of things. But yeah, I mean, I thought the post was really thought provoking, at least for me, because I really like to study this stuff. I'm always trying to find little things that I can do to put into my process. And like to hit another one of yours, which is, if you know what's going to happen, you know what to do.
Boom.
That's a big one.
That is huge. Why? Because that gets you thinking about the future, right? Because we see it now. Everyone's panicking. Everyone's thinking in the moment and how they feel. Okay. But if you know what's going to happen, and we basically do. Why? Because China, South Korea, Italy, France, and Spain, Germany are all coming out of this, right? The math is
Right.
pretty clear. The pre-existing conditions and your likelihood of getting it and how your body's going to respond to it is mathematically determined. But you have the control over what you do and how you react. So you can panic and sell all your equities and hopefully buy them back at the bottom. But you got to know the bottom. And I put a post out. It was my most popular post where I told CEOs not to lay anybody off, especially salespeople. And I made my argument. This is temporary. You spent all the money training them. They're revenue generating. Look for other alternatives. By the time you realize that they're gone, you're going to need them back. And they're going to go to your competitors. So you know what's going to happen and you know what to do. And that might be different in the industries that won't come back as fast, that will take months and months. But most, it's going to take a month and a half, 2 months.
If you know what's going to happen, you know what to do. And I think that's really important too in the sales world, is if you can show your prospect what the next step looks like and paint a really clear picture of how this solves their unique problems and stuff. If they know what's going to happen, they'll know what to do. It's like that. It's so true on so many different levels. It's like basic human psychology.
Right.
If people need that certainty, and if they're certain on what's going to happen, of course they're going to know what action to take. I think it's our job to just illuminate that path a little bit for
Right.
people, because they don't think, they just react.
They just
it all
react.
ties together.
right? And if you've got a buyer who only cares about return on investment and has a 5-year time frame, you want to sell them the thing that's going to give you the highest return and explain why. Because they're thinking ahead. People who are thinking in the moment, oh, we just had another kid, now we need a house, right? Okay, you're going to need this, but when you retire, what's your long-term plan? How long do you want to have the house? Is this a 5-year house, a lifetime house? Because that all matters. And people are not good at thinking ahead. That law or rule gets you thinking ahead, right? Because
Exactly.
the inverse of it is everyone says, I knew that was going to happen, right?
Right.
Yeah. And I got a friend that I talked to about like what's going on now. And it's like, okay, this is what they're going to do. They're going to start cutting the hours of the grocery stores. They're going to cut down how many people can be in there. They're going to start making us wear masks. How did I know this? Because that's what they did other places, right? It's like,
Yeah, it's not too hard to figure out if you're thinking objectively.
if you're thinking, but everyone's got a crystal clear rear view mirror, but the windshield is about this far ahead. Our next meal, our next nap, our next day. That's because we're mammals. I think people think of themselves as a person, as a, I think at such a high level, but they don't understand what's driving them.
Yeah, that limbic brain is in all of us. Once you're aware of how fallible all of us are, you, me, everybody,
Right.
It changes the game, which is why I love sales so much, because you don't have to be a supercomputer at Goldman Sachs to compete on these trades. You're working with other people and it's limitless.
Right. And that's it. And people think it's like 90% prefrontal cortex. It's just the opposite. It's 10% prefrontal cortex, 90% your little reptile brain, which is reactive, short-term, survival oriented. Okay.
Right. Fight or flight.
Fight or flight.
Or freeze. That's actually it. It's freeze and then fight or flight.
Right. And that we got to realize that with clients. If we ask a question, make a statement, how is this going to make them feel? If you know what's going to happen, you know what to do. Thinking through.
That's like a really good exercise. Brian, I'm not sure, I know you were a top sales performer, and I'm not sure if you got into management. I'll ask you about that. But do you ever have your sales teams do exercises like that? Because I think it's really valuable. When you ask someone to buy something, when you ask them to cut the check, how do you think it makes them feel? Put yourself in their shoes. And if you can start thinking through that, you're going to be that much more equipped to help navigate that situation when the time comes. Because what you are doing, you're activating that survival part of the brain. Oh no, they're going to close me. Oh no, I'm gonna have to make a decision. What if it's wrong? What if it's not the right step? I think it's good. I'm not sure if it's good. That's a different place to be. You're not gonna reason with that person with just pure logic. You got to get emotional with them.
Yes.
But if you know what's gonna happen,
you know what to do. Right, because certainly in your space, when people are making the largest purchase in their life, the moment before they sign that contract is one of the scariest moments of their life. They may not be feeling it, but you might see the shake. You'll come up with all these little objections. I need more time. Let me get a couple more bids from mortgage brokers. Let me look at one more house. Why? Because that's when it gets real.
And by the way, if it's not overtly positive, it's covertly negative. That means they're not feeling this. And it's not just B2B too. Like when you're closing the deal and it's the CTO is making the decision, you know that it's his or her ass on the line.
I can't tell you the number of times I've been, 7:30 at night, the last day of the quarter, I'm in the CEO's office. And what does he do? He's calling in all his chiefs, the person who wants it, the person in legal, procurement. And then probably half the time he goes, can I make a phone call? And I go, to who? Some board member. Right? I mean, here's a lot of money on the line. And I'm thinking like a normal sales guy. Woo-hoo. Where am I going for a drink after this? And then all of a sudden it's like, this is a little bit of panic. He wants to cover his face. he's not looking for approval. He's looking for consensus validation because he's a little uncomfortable. You know, the ROI makes sense. They've got the money. They need it. They want it. It does what they expect. There's no logical reason why they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, that's an intense place to be. I think we've all been there as salespeople where you're already told your manager it's good, it's in the bag, and then this comes in at the end.
Yeah.
So that's a good one. Here's another one you said that I liked, which was, and it sounds like, of course, but there's some real, if you peel back the layers, it's important, which is everyone loves a surprise, but they really don't like it when it's a disappointment.
Never. This is my real forecasting law, why everyone called me a sandbagger. Because the manager wants the forecast to look pretty and big.
Right.
The problem is, if it doesn't all come in, there's a disappointment. And even though you might blow your number away, they're still disappointed. But that last week of the quarter, a deal starts to surface. And then it starts getting bigger versus smaller, which every other deal is getting. And then it closes 2 days before you said it would. I go, phew, that's a beautiful surprise. And I've only had like one manager get on me about it because he would just hound me. Well, tell me about other deals. Why can't you make it bigger? And it's like, because they're a lot like parents, you know, do they complain about they complain about the 1B, right? You come home with straight A's and that's a B. Well, why didn't you get an A in gym? It's like, gym, who cares?
Hey, that's one of the only classes I did get A's in, actually. Love gym. I miss high school gym, man. That's
everyone loves a surprise. Everyone hates a disappointment.
Yeah, so that's a good one, a forecasting law. Maybe not the managers don't love it as much, but if they know what's good for them, they should encourage that type of behavior. Because do you want to set yourself up for failure?
Yeah, I'd start off the quarter skinny. I'd build it up. And everyone else was doing just the opposite. They would put 300% of pipeline in there and then disappointment, 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 disappointment. And the manager would go, well, I got to go help them close that deal. I kept the manager away from me so I could close the deals, right?
Oh, yeah. I was always that way too. Like I really prefer to be left alone.
The best story is I had this $2.5 million deal, largest deal in the company's history. It was iffy at best. And we're going up against the end of the government fiscal year. And I had it on the forecast for 200K with 30% likelihood.
So 200, so 1/10.
1/10. And I started building it up over the quarter, but reducing or keeping the likelihood down. Then my manager talked to somebody else at the company and found out it was closer to 2.5. And he goes, why is this so low here? It's go, dude, there's so much risk. You know, we got to get a buying vehicle. We don't have support from security yet. Legal hasn't reviewed it. All these risks. You know, he came in 2 days before the end of the quarter. My manager was never so happy before in his life. He thought I was a magician. Now, if I did just the opposite, I put it at 80% at 2.5, and it comes in, they're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect. You have to think about it think, not react. Like, hey, I got news that it's a $2.5 million opportunity. Don't just react and say, oh, my pipeline's full. Check, hey, look at me. Think it through, and you have to think about it like almost like an actuarian, like an insurance thing. How you're talking about assessing this risk. Like, hey, well, like, yeah, maybe it is 2.5, but what is the actual likelihood? What you put down there is actually, you're not lying. It's not completely untrue. It's what you think is based in reality for the right expectation for everybody.
Right. And the same thing when you go into negotiations on a house. If you set the expectation that they can bid 10% below ask and get it, and they end up paying 5% below ask, they feel like you don't know what you're doing. Right?
Exactly. Everybody loves a surprise, but they hate that.
But you get 15% below ask, they think you're a genius.
Yeah, it makes less sense. So I was thinking that's where that rule would go, but it sounds like, I think someone in the comments were like, oh, that's obvious. Everyone loves a surprise. No one likes to be disappointed. Not in the sales world when you're thinking about how you're setting the stage. Again, this is a Broadway play put on by psychiatrists. You have to put your ducks in a row. And that's a really good law. And I like how you said, it's a forecasting thing.
Yeah,
So if you just,
it's an interaction with either the client or the boss, because what typically as sales reps, we tend to overpromise and underdeliver, and that's a disappointment. But if you're upfront with people, set expectations a little below what you think you can deliver, you over deliver. That's a nice surprise. You know,
that's a
and
good way to get
salespeople,
referrals.
yeah, salespeople are great at saying something's obvious after they see it happen. Every magic trick is obvious after you see how it works. Before you see how it works, it's magic. The minute you know how it works, it's obvious.
Yeah, well, if you know what's going to happen, you know what to do.
There you go.
You know, all these things all tie together. Here's another one. Let's hit another one. And I could do this all day, so I'm just going to keep hitting you until you cut me off, Brian. This one caused a little bit of, you had some back and forth on this one, which is people will always do what's in their own best interest. And people were thinking, well, this guy just doesn't have any empathy. There's no such thing as altruism. What do you mean by that in a sales capacity?
Right. We are survival creatures. We are blinded by our own needs, and we are blinded by other people's needs because they're not aligned with ours. Okay. We don't tell the truth. We tell what we believe to be the truth in a socially acceptable way. Okay. Now, can you give me an example of where somebody doesn't work in their own best interest based off their identity, not just the moment? A parent will sacrifice their life for a child. Is that in their best interest? Not really, but in their model, in their identity, it is. Do people give kidneys to other people? If that's their identity.
Right.
Okay. So it's a variation of it. And I think people like to argue. But when you're thinking about people buying, ask yourself, what's in their best interest? Because we're thinking, what's in my best interest?
All the time.
Right,
no, I agree with it. I agree. I fully agree. Like, hey, I'm not doing this just because I want to stroke Brian and get some air and provide some value to all you guys. I want some attention.
Right.
I'm doing this for me. Just like Brian's doing the show for him. And it goes down and it's basically rooted in our DNA. I don't understand how people can argue with it, period, but people tend to have a problem with it.
Well, people don't want to admit or they think it's being selfish. You can't avoid it. It's the way we're wired. Okay. Now, there's people hoarding toilet paper today. They've got a 2-year supply of toilet paper. Are they thinking about other people?
That's the other thing. You never know. They might be hoarding that toilet paper to go deliver it to some church somewhere. But
the currency.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, there's always extenuating circumstances, but like you said, this is baked into your DNA. You cannot change this as much as you want to, as long as it's within like your identity and your kind of view of the world. It's like proven. There's a book called The Selfish Gene by Richard Dawkins, famous scientist.
Right.
Can't argue with it.
Right. We're born. All we're trying to do is survive. Okay. And then you take an unstructured environment as an example. I'm sure you've flown. You get off a plane. Does everybody stay to the right, walk at the same pace, be considerate before they take a turn or stop? No. They get off the plane. They're looking around. They don't know where they want to go. They go at the pace they want. They get a phone call. They stop dead. And you're right behind them. And you're like,
yeah.
Are they thinking?
No.
No. Are they being considerate?
No.
No. How's it feel when you get cut off? It's not a logical thing to be upset when you get cut off, right? It's just an emotional, that person is doing what's best for them at that moment. They didn't get up that morning and say, I'm going to cut off Andrew in traffic today. They're like, I can squeeze in. I'm sure he doesn't mind. And you're like, yeah, I do mind because now I have to slam on the brakes and it's annoying.
Yeah, it's being mindful, being aware, which is a whole nother different thing. But for a salesperson, it is important to kind of have that mindfulness about you, because the masses, when they get cut off, and we're probably guilty of this too, you're fucking pissed.
Of course you are. because
People kill people doing that. It's weird.
you're reducing their social value. What you are feeling is they are better than you. They think they're better than you. But they're thinking, oh, you won't mind. There's plenty of space.
I have a problem with this because I drive fast. Okay. Maybe not the safest driver. Hope my insurance agent's not watching. And like I have a Tesla. Sometimes it drives itself. And like I'm a realtor. I'm in my car all the time. I'm really happy with that as an automobile. But I'm not unaware that when I cut someone off, and it happens once in a while, I'm hyper aware. Oh, they really hate me because they're like, look at that prick. Car, Tesla. Look at him. And I'm like, oh God, I really want to be overtly positive. I'm so sorry. This my bad.
Yeah, see you.
But bringing it back to the sales world, how does that work in sales? Like, if you want to be a great salesperson,
all the way from prospecting to closure. Okay, why is somebody going to talk to you? It's got to be in their best interest to talk with you. It's got to be of value to them, not. And what blinds us from producing that is, well, it's my job. It's my job to sell. It must be your job to buy. No, it's not. It's our job to create curiosity and interest and turn it into urgency and action. And to do that, we have to bring value. We have to give. We have to ask. We have to build that up. And we have to think the way they think, which is a very counterintuitive approach. But what most people do is tell you how great your product or service is. And that's like, okay, so what? Everyone says that. You're no different. I'm not in market right now. I'm all set.
Yeah, I think once you wrap your head around that concept, it does make prospecting that much more acceptable to do. Like, I'm just trying to see if I can help this guy get what he needs.
Right. And you don't start at interest. You start at curiosity. You try and build that. And you're probably trying to reference some kind of relationship that you already have indirectly with them. You have people in common, interests in common, relationships in common, common objectives. Getting you the house that you want, making you aware of the real estate market today, helping you decide what you should do, buy, sell, or hold.
Yeah, that's big. When you're thinking about these psychological principles, it's really good to think about how you're going to use your next, your marketing piece. What messaging are you really trying to say? And these core principles, if you can pull out little things, it's almost like Influence, famous book, Robert Cialdini. I'm sure everyone's read that. There's laws to how you're going to influence somebody. But like what you said, you're not going to try to convince anybody of anything when you're prospecting. Your job as a salesperson, here's another one of my rules, laws, if you will, which is your job. You cannot convince people to buy your product or service. You have to help them discover why they want it. Yeah. Because people will never argue with their own data. But they'll argue with you all day. But if they say it, no one hits you with a point and then just starts arguing why they don't make sense.
Right. Because think of any other profession in the world. They all have rules and laws. Accounting, law, medicine, engineering, construction. Sales, folklore, right, at best.
It really is. It's kind of crazy. It is folklore. It's a wild, wild west out here, Brian. You know that.
Right. And what happens is by the time somebody becomes good at it, they become unconsciously competent. They don't know why they're good at it. They can't articulate it. So I had an engineering background, and when I got into sales, it's like, I have no idea why this person's successful and this person isn't. So I wanted to dissect it. What are the elements? What are the consistent patterns? If I lost a deal, why did I lose the deal? And start writing them down, because I wanted a lot more than it's all about relationships. It's all about trust. It's all about, one particular skill or unique approach. I wanted, like, what are the elements of it? Like chemistry, like software, like construction.
Well, it is a mechanical process. When you break it down, sales is a mechanical process. There has to be trust, or the rapport, and there has to be some mutual agreement. And then there has to be, and that's why it's a very common misconception that all salespeople are all great salespeople are these like type A, super outgoing, high D, high I, disc type of people. And some of the best, at least that I've found, are people who, and everyone knows engineers are tough to sell to. Oh my God, the question. It's like really tough. But the engineer who can turn to a salesperson like Brian did, and I'm sure there's a ton of people out there, they end up having such a leg up because they're not overly excited. They understand it's a process. They know where they are and they know where their prospect is.
Yeah.
And it makes the game a lot easier.
Right. And I think the other big problem for reps is that nobody really teaches them these things. That they're taught questioning skills, they're taught, step-by-step processes, but they're not taught that it's a performance. They're not shown what's good and bad. That they're not coached based off of performance or actions. They're coached off of numbers. How many calls did you make? How many showings did you have? Things that you can count, which has an element. Yes, you have to have activity, right? You can't stay in bed all day and sell anything. You have to get up at a certain time. You have to do a certain amount of actions. But what's more important is you do the right actions with the right people in the right way. And too many of us get stuck in this belief, if it's not working, it's something outside of me instead of me.
Yeah, well, you learn a lot more from when it doesn't work. And that's a semi-cliche thing to say, but it's unbelievably true if you do the debriefing process.
Yeah.
Which is, if you're a sales rep and you're like, wow, I really should be getting better. I have lost a couple of deals. No one even asked me why I lost them. I don't even know how I lost them. You need to have a debrief process for even when you win the deal, when you got it, but it could have been bigger, and especially when you didn't get it. Because when you win, you don't learn anything. You're high-fiving your buddy, you're going to the bar, having a beer, talking about how awesome you are. And you really should have been like, I probably could have got a referral out of that too, right out of the gate.
Yeah, and if you lose a deal, estimate that commission amount, and that's how much you paid for that lesson. So you can ignore it, or you can document it and never repeat it and prevent it from the next time.
Yeah, that's a really important process, especially if you're newer in sales. You will get good quick if you're willing to just, people hate getting feedback. And that's probably some kind of psychological lesson we've talked about already. But no one likes to be told that what they did wasn't the right way.
Right.
And if you can accept it and say, if I accept this, I will get to go to the bank with fatter checks.
Right. And the number one consistent thing that I saw in interviewing great salespeople was that they came from a performance background, either athletics, where there's a coach, there's winning and losing, there's team pressure, there's performance arts. You got the audience. Are they booing or are they clapping? You get immediate feedback. You get a ranking, an alignment. You get a coach. You get an instructor. You're constantly given feedback. The military, you know exactly where you stand every minute of the day. And there's an exact structure and process, and it's assumed that it's your fault if something goes wrong. Now, if you've been a wallflower and you haven't had any feedback and you've been off to yourself and you're shy about that or sensitive to it, it's going to be a hard journey.
Yeah, you get broken. And it's okay to get broken.
Right.
Okay.
If you're in a knowledge profession like accounting, right, it's either right or wrong. If you pass the CPA, you're an accountant. You're a skilled accountant. Now you take that to a performance like a trial lawyer, okay? You pass the bar. That doesn't mean you can win a case. That means you understand the law. Too many salespeople have passed the bar, but they haven't won a trial.
And you only get paid for winning trials.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. And who you want to defend you? The guy who has the highest score on the bar exam or the most wins in that particular type of case?
Exactly. I say that same thing all the time. Do you want the agent who's going to bring you a pie? Right. Or do you want who's going to get you definitely the top dollar for your house when you sell it?
Right.
You got to take your pick. Do you want the doctor who does, do you care if your heart surgeon brings you the pies, Brian? You don't care. No,
nobody cares. Nobody's asking them their political, religious stance. Wait a second, he doesn't speak clear English. Oh, well, he's the top cardiac surgeon in the world. You know what? I don't care. Save my life.
Exactly. And that's like, you have to be, another rule would be, you really do have to believe that your prospects are better off buying from you than someone else, and buying your solution than someone else. You had talked about that early in this book, which is, if you're not sold yourself, you're not going to get very far, because you're not in alignment with your own core value.
Right.
So I think a lot of people give up on sales because they're like, oh, I can't get a job, I'm going to go sell whatever it is, internet service or some basic job, but they're not so sold on it themselves. Of course, they're not going to be successful.
Yeah. Cool.
So that's a key one. Well, Brian, we covered a lot. One last thing I want to touch on this, because we both brought it up, but there's a matrix, and we talked about being unconsciously incompetent, which simply means maybe you saw some of this today and you're like, wow, I didn't even know that I didn't know that.
Right.
Like, oh, that's what Brian meant when he said divide and concur.
Right.
So you have to go in sales from being, and everyone starts at the same place, you don't know what you don't know, to being consciously incompetent. Like, hey, at least now I know that I don't know shit, and I have a lot to work on.
Right. And you see this because a lot of those comments were just knee-jerk reactions, right? And my point, they say, oh, it's emotional intelligence. Well, it's a lot more than emotional intelligence, because this outward mindset that I talk about, which includes curiosity, interest, and empathy, those are very advanced skills that we all have to become good at. That's putting ourselves in the other person's place. That's curious about what drives them, interested in their life, how they get rewarded. And a lot of people don't have that mindset yet.
You have to get to a point where you're unconsciously competent about those things.
Right. And the way to do it is to get really uncomfortable. Hey, okay, what am I curious about? People will say to me, how do I become curious? What don't you know that you want to know? Assume that you don't know everything. What am I missing? Become interested in the other person.
What don't I know that I want to know is a really powerful question. That's why I've already started asking myself that. And it's stuff like this that we're talking about that, thank God I got interested in it at a young age. It's allowed me to do pretty well, and it's going to continue to propel my success. So, Ryan, I'll just say, really appreciate you keep putting out the content. Thanks for letting me come on and share. I got a ton of notes. I'll whenever this episode comes out, I'm going to write down all mine and just put a comment in there and give a summary of my take on some of yours. But my final rule is this: it's autodidact or bust. Autodidact is a fancy word that means you have to teach yourself.
Yes.
You're a self-learner. If you want to make it in this business, you better be, no one should have to pull and drag you up and say, you should learn how to get better. It's on you. And it's all there. YouTube, everything's there.
It's 100% up to you. And the thing is, it never ends. You know, I've been doing this 35 plus years, and I think I've learned more in the last 2 than I did in the last 20. I've been a student of it. And now the more you learn, the more you understand what you don't know, which does become compounding. So that you start building off of it. The B player trap is the know-it-alls, the knee-jerk reactions. It's just about relationships. They're not learning. They're not open. They're not wondering what they don't know. So they're not getting better. They're Groundhog Daying it, waking up every morning listening to Sonny and Cher and hitting the alarm clock. They're living the same day and year over and over again. And if it doesn't go well, it's someone else's fault.
It's so true that there's the line in sales, which is, hey, this guy's got 20 years of sales experience, but really he's got 1 year of sales experience 20 times because he didn't compound. And it's so true. And this is another one of these little brain tricks, but it is true, which is the more you know about something, especially something vast like sales, because human psychology is what we're talking about, in communication. The more you know, the more you realize you really don't know.
Right.
And it compounds that way. I think like Neil deGrasse Tyson talks about that all the time with physics. Like the more you understand about the solar system, the more you really know.
It's just the beginning.
We don't have it. We don't have it.
Hey, I appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect you?
I'm on LinkedIn, Andrew Undum. I've been posting a lot of content on Instagram. That's what us cool millennials do. I'm at Undum. And again, always happy to help.
Yeah, but
chime
nobody
in.
wants to see your bikini pictures.
Oh no, I throw up a lot of real estate content with my
Oh,
little
I
cool
see.
logo. Yeah, yeah. And sometimes my kids. I'm not. If you heard any shrieking through my microphone, I got 2 kids at home, so I'm gonna go take care of them, and I'll know where I stand with my wife. If it's not overtly positive, then
You
I'm
know what
back
it
in
is.
the covertly negative.